We overthink ourselves and then we feel stuck in a situation. Take one thing at a time, focus on the next step, understanding the long goal. The sacrifices today will pay off for tomorrow. That will help a lot of us to really move forward.
Okay, welcome to another edition of the Journey to Freedom podcast, and I'm Dr. B. I'm your host. And there's days where I say I'm excited because I'm always excited about the guests that I have. But then there's days where I just go, I can't wait to do this podcast. I can't wait to do this show. And today is one of those days that last year, Ashley and I were able to get together, and we met each other over at the NAREB convention that was in New Orleans, and it was unbelievable. I can't wait to go back this year. I know it's going to be in LA. He'll probably talk about that a little bit, but we got to have some dialogue, and we got to talk. And my podcast was at the infancies at the time we talked. Over the summer, and I probably had 50 to 60 episodes that are, we are now over 170 episodes that we have put together of Black men who are doing a whole lot to make this world a different place. This last January, at the end of January, I was able to take 18 of the men that we've talked to, and we took them to Alabama for a civil rights victory tour. And that was, talk about transformational. And I felt like I walked back into the 1970s. And, we were in Birmingham, went from Birmingham, and we went to Selma, and then we ended up at Montgomery at the Equal Justice Museum. But to have some of these guys, I had two of my son and my son-in-law. One lives in Rancho Cucamonga, one lives in Rialto. They were able to fly out and go there. And even though I've talked about stuff over our lifetime, it's different when you have adult children that are now experiencing, the things that have went on, the things that the shoulders of, the giants that we stand on as we move forward and as we do things. And Journey to Freedom came from me just going to a trust leadership conference where there was a room where we were learning about trust. There was 500 people there, and there are about 30 folks that are people of color that were in the room. And I'm like, why is our community not accessing this information? And why are we not benefiting and flourishing as a result? And I came back, and that's what began the Journey to Freedom podcast. And since then, it's been successful man after successful man who's successful man that have done stuff. We even started a show called Why Love Waits on Sunday nights, where we're talking about it. And I don't know if you know the statistic, but there's about 49.8% of Black women who are over the age of 40 have never been married. And there's an issue with our families, and there's an issue with, because it wasn't like that in the 40s and 50s and the 60s, there wasn't as much integration, and there was segregation, and, the things our kids were doing well in schools. And then 75% of that 50% have at least one child. And so we're thinking about where are men at in the, growing kids. And one of the themes that I found from this podcast is that men do want to take care of their kids. Men do want the responsibility. Men do want to provide. It just sometimes seems like there's this bad rap that sometimes we get. And so hence why you're on the show. Ashley is the president-elect of the NAREB Association, which is the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, which is the Black Realist. And I want you to learn a lot about it. And, we'll talk about some websites to go to at the end. But he's also a very successful businessman that lives in Southern California and has just done some amazing things. And like all of our guests, I've asked him to tell his story first, because it's one thing to know what we do. It's another thing to know who we are and where we came from and how we got. Because the other theme, actually, that folks have said is, I needed to see somebody who looked like me doing whatever, even close to doing whatever, to know that I could do that. Now, myself, I would say, I don't need that. I don't need to see people. But then I go to these events like the Trust Edge, and I find myself counting. They're 1, 2, and I find myself going to talk to people. So I pretend like I don't care, but it does matter. And then I get to go to a place like NAREB and go, I don't need to count anybody. We're here. We're home. And so thank you for being willing to be on. Thank you for having these conversations that you have offline with other folks. And please go ahead and tell your story, and then we'll just kind of chop it up after that.
No, Dr. B, first, let me just thank you for inviting me out and then calling me successful. I appreciate the compliment there. Obviously it's hard work every day. And so I'm just thankful to God to even be here, to be here today. But I will say, my story starts, and I won't go too long because I could ramble on my story for a while, but I'll just kind of hit some highlights. I graduated high school and entered the workforce right away. Got into banking. I've been working since I was 14 and a half years old or whatnot. And then, so when I graduated, I got into banking, and then I did that for some years while I was going to college. And the bank ultimately was robbed one day. And so they allowed us to be retrained. And so I left the teller line and then went and learned mortgages. And so I've been doing mortgages now for over 25 years. And then I also entered into real estate during that time as well. So I was in my early 20s doing that, learning, as well as just really trying to soak up all the information that I could in this particular industry. I fell into it a little bit as opposed to this being something that I wanted to do, but I fell in love with it because we're able to help so many people get into home ownership, which obviously creates generational wealth. So fast forward a little bit, 2007 or so, I ended up opening up a company and expanding my company there. I did some servicing for some time where people were in foreclosure, really trying to help them save their homes. And I found that it was very challenging to save people once they were so far behind. So I really wanted to deal with it more on the origination side, really learn how to help people on the front side so that way they didn't run into these problems on the backside. And so I've been doing real estate and mortgages for that amount of time. As you stated, I am the president-elect of the National Association of Real Estate Brokers. We are a organization that was founded in 1947 during the time where Blacks were not allowed to practice real estate openly in a lot of areas. We couldn't purchase properties in many areas. So it just allowed, so we've been fighting for democracy and housing ever since then. And I joined the organization in late 2009, truly as a volunteer organization, was able to service and give a lot of my time and efforts to that. Really was able to learn from a lot of icon members, which I denote a lot of my success in business, just being a part of a volunteer organization such as NAREB. And so now we are here today. We have our annual convention in July, at which time I'll be sworn in as the president of the organization. And there's so much to discuss in terms of housing, the current administration, and all those things. But that's pretty much an overview of my story. I'm the broker owner of LA Top Broker right here in Los Angeles. We lend in California, Texas, Louisiana, and Georgia. And we do real estate throughout the state of California. So I'm very excited to be here.
Oh, cool. When I talk about identity and thinking about the person that we have become, and you don't just end up show up out of high school or show up and you are now president-elect of a national organization. What are some things that you had to do to work on your identity, and who were you? Like you said, out of high school I went straight to work. Where we sometimes we talk about, hey, you got to go get this degree, or you got to go to this trade school, or you got to do this and this. How did that transpire for you to become the person that you are today?
Well, I would say first, I was raised in a single mother household. And so my mother was really disciplined in terms of making sure we got up and we went to work and we went to school. That's what we did. There was no questions about it. It wasn't a sneeze and I get to stay home. It was like you had to be, it was either school or the hospital. Where are we going? So I think that really imparted into my work ethics. No matter what, you got to show up. And I think that's a big part of it. So my identity has always been to show up. Even if you don't know, you're not comfortable, whatever it is, most of the job is really showing up and being present. And so those are the things that I really try to instill into my children now, is that, we show up. We got to get up in the morning and be present. And so I'm seeing that manifest in them, and I'm excited about that. But that's pretty much, I would say that that's something that my mother instilled in me at a very, very young age, that no matter what, you have to show up.
Gotcha. It sounds like you had an incredibly amazing mom that you should have. Were there other mentors or people around? Did you grow up in LA or did you grow up in another part of the country?
You said your son is in Rialto. I actually grew up in Rialto, Pomona, Rialto, bouncing back and forth. My grandmother was very instrumental in my life. But in terms of like the molding and the mentoring and that, as a young man, I would say my church community, because that was another thing. Sunday morning, we were going to church no matter what. And then also I played sports. So getting that competitive edge, that energy and all of that out of there. I was a basketball player throughout high school. I still think I can get out there, but I think my mind is more than my body at this stage in my life. But I still will take on a challenge anywhere. So, but yeah, I think that those, my coaches and everything, like really were mentoring. I keep in contact with everyone still to this day.
Did you go to high school out in Rialto, or?
I did. I actually went to Bloomington High School, which is like on the south of Rialto area.
Yeah. I taught at Cal State San Bernardino for several years, and so I know the area really well. And then UC Riverside, and ended up at Azusa Pacific University as a professor there. So I know the area well. When I think about the identity and what we move in and moving up, you kind of talked about your coaches and the things. Was there anything like as a dream or things that you wanted to be? You probably didn't dream I'm going to go be the president-elect of NAREB someday when you were in high school. But what were some of the dreams that you had that you were able to kind of say, okay, these are things that I think I can achieve, I want to achieve? What did that look like?
I think for me, the dream was just security. My mother, she bought a home early in my life. And so I had a lot of friends that moved around all the time. And so we were just there. And so my mom's home is pretty funny because everyone's called it like Central Station. Everybody just knew that's where we were going to be at. If my phone number changed or my pager number changed back then, not trying to date myself, they knew that they could go to my mom's house and say, hey, where's Ashley? And so I took that from her in terms of understanding what stability is. So in terms of like dreams, my dream was always to be financially secure, not have to be stressful about those types of things. Now in terms of career, I never thought I would get into real estate. It was a dream that, took off on its own. And I'm so blessed to be a part of it. But I would say that I wanted to attend college and become an attorney. Right. I had a son at an early age, and my focus had to change to him on that. And so I'm blessed to be able to fall into something that I love, and it wasn't a negative, and he's doing a phenomenal job, and I'm so proud of that. But things happen in life, and you have to bounce back, and you have to learn how to pivot. And so I had to make that pivot into real estate, and it's been a blessing for my family. So.
What do you think? I think about liars, and I think of all of the folks who say, I want to have my own business, or I want to be secure, I want to be that. And so many people talk about it, but so few people actually do it. And there was a point in your life where you said, I'm working for the bank. They've taught me all these skills, but I don't want to spend the rest of my life working for the bank. I want to do this on my own. What kind of walk us through what led you to be able to say, I'm going to do this, and then be willing to just take that risk to make that happen? I think there's so many people who go, I think I want to do it, but I'm scared. What?
Yeah, I think being in banking at such an early age, assisting customers as they walked in, seeing the different flow in terms of financial wherewithal on individuals, I was drawn to entrepreneurship as a result of that, and so I had a thirst for it. And I think the most important thing in entrepreneurship or learning or starting a business or whatnot is to really be humble, is really to ask the questions. And I think sometimes we engage ourselves into meetings or into situations and act as though we know, and we don't. And so, my advice is to be humble and ask the questions. I asked a million questions to a lot of people, and I said, well, how do I set this up? Is that the best way? And then I would go ask someone else, this is what I'm advised on how we should set this up, and I think it really comes down to really asking the questions that you don't know and being humble about it and removing ego. Ego is the biggest deterrent of success that I have ever seen there. So I to this day, I have mentors. I've been in the business 25 years, but it doesn't mean that I can't learn from somebody who's been in the business 10 years. And so to be able to be forever teachable is very important. And so that's one thing that I would say that I pretty much have. The reason why I got into entrepreneurship and try to maintain my level of success and engagement is really to be humble and remove ego, and then to give back. I teach classes every week to people, whether they're in my company or not in my company. Everybody's welcome to join my class and get involved in that. And I think that gives me a sense of being able to pour back into the community. And so I love it. And so I'll continue to do that.
Thank you for sharing that. We've mentioned mentors a few times, so far. You talked about the mentors that help shape your identity. But what I think that's super important that people realize is there's mentors that continue you forward in order to move up. And it's probably not just one mentor in your life that does everything. It's like you have to seek out and look for people, right? I mean, they didn't just show up and knock on your door and say, Ashley, I would love to mentor you today. How do I do that? I mean,
Right.
how did you seek out people?
Absolutely. There's a lot of mentors. You have different ones. You have a mentor who's going to teach you how to scale your business from A to Z. But then you also have a mentor who's going to teach you how to be a better parent. And then you have a mentor who's going to teach you, how to maintain your emotions in these types of situations. You can draw different things from different people. And I think when we met at the NAREB convention and we were in the men's session, just sitting there, even if you're not speaking, you're listening, you're drawing something from everyone, right? And so in terms of a capacity, when we use the word mentor, sometimes we tie it to where we're going to meet every Friday, we're going to have coffee, we're going to do this. No, I think even just in the engagement of a conversation, you can draw something from someone and really apply it into your life. And so, or you can draw something from someone and decide, I do not want to apply that, right? Because mentorship comes in multiple ways, right? Sometimes you will say, you know what, I don't want to do that. And so you learn from that and you apply it to your life accordingly.
Yeah. Because I have mentors that even like online or YouTube videos that I watch that they may never know that they're my mentor, but I will consume 100 hours or 50 hours of content just so that I can become a different person, or I can become better. One of the things that I would love to talk about is family, and so, or even even we can break it down to the Black family if we want. And I know that you're a dad, and one of the things that has also been a theme is talking to dad, because I think we realize that kids need a mom and a dad. They absolutely 100% for them to thrive and grow. And they don't always get that. And sometimes it's the community that takes over as one of the roles of the parent. But sometimes we neglect to talk about what does it mean to be a dad, and how has that changed our lives and how we look at any situation we have, because we are a dad and we care about what our kids are going to get from it, and we're trying to protect them, and we want to be the example. And I think sometimes it changes how we go through life. I mean, we're this one person when we're graduating high school and we're getting out into the world, and then we become a father or a dad. It kind of changes that. What does it mean to you to be a dad?
I mean, it's everything. It's the greatest accomplishment I've ever had. Being able to see pour into my children, but then there's a lot that our children give us that sometimes we don't think about. They give you the strength to get up. You got to be strong, and they help you through whatever, and don't even know what's going on or whatnot. And so, I have 3 beautiful children. Amari is 24, Taylor is 19, and Journey is 9. And so, they're great. It's just a great feeling for me. Probably the few things that can probably take a grown man to tears is talking about, their children. And so, I love them to death. There's nothing I wouldn't do. And I just think that that's a different type of, for those that are not involved in their children's life, I would just say that you're missing out, but it's never too late. My father passed away several years ago, and we had a strained relationship when I became a teenager or whatnot, because he wasn't present. But then later, upon his death, years prior to that, we made amends, and that was my best friend. And so, it came full circle. And so I would just encourage those that are watching that might have challenges with your children or whatnot, have fallen out. It's never too late to correct it. I know my father and I did. And like I said earlier, when I was saying, sometimes you could take things from people like a mentor, you could take a piece from somebody and say, I don't want to do that, and so I've applied that with my father, and those gaps to my children. I don't want to do that. I want to do things differently. And so I've been able to do things differently.
Wow. And so when you think about family and how important family is, I know faith is a part of, your makeup and who you are. But, as you approach family and you had the, estranged dad for a little bit and, an incredible mom that raised you, how does those experiences help you in thinking about your responsibility, in your family and what you have to do? I mean, sometimes we get so into our work or the things we do that, we have to, I guess, try to balance family. But for some of us, no, family comes first no matter what. There's no balancing, but you're still running a corporation at the same time, right? So
yeah, so I've struggled at periods in my life with work-life balance. I think that's something that every entrepreneur probably can acknowledge that they've struggled with, because you're committed to wanting to give your family a different life than maybe that you had. And so you're head down working, and you might look up and you're missing something, or you're not fully engaged. And so I think, especially today, we live in a world of technology. So everybody has a cell phone. They're at the dinner table. Everybody's on their own phone. And I think, trying to be intentional is very important about the time that we have, because we all understand tomorrow's not promised. I'm 45, be 46 shortly. And I think, looking back, I've had friends that are no longer with us. And so you have to think about, I wonder what they would wish they could have back. And I think it would be family. They'd be the interaction with their children or whatnot. And so I take that very serious.
Well, and as I see, you talked about your kids a little bit, and you have one that's 24 and another one that's 9. So
yeah,
you have to show up as a different dad, between those two relationships, right? I mean,
I think the 24-year-old, because I was much younger, me running around at the park was a little different than me running around at the park with a 9-year-old today, and so we do a little bit more play dates, so they have friends that will run, because I'm not so much the runner anymore. But yeah, it's different, but then also too, it's different financially, right? So today, raising children is different than 20 years ago was it for me when I was trying to get up off the ground. And I think that that's things that we have to, talk a little bit more about and be honest about, and so I talk to my children about that. They understand, different situations. My son might say, well, when I was growing up, I didn't get to do that, and so, hey, we have a conversation. So.
Yeah, I think it's so good, because sometimes I think we don't want to show our kids or talk about the times when we struggled, but failure and struggle is part of success. And even though they weren't times that we say, oh, I did great, or I made mistakes or whatever it is, I think it's so important that we have those conversations and we get to talk about it. And I mean, have you been able to? It sounds like you've been able to, hey, this is 2007 and 8 weren't the greatest years of our lives, and these are the things that happened, and then so forth as you move forward.
Oh no, absolutely. I think having the conversations is a class, it's a training, right? So I'm teaching my children like, hey, these are the mistakes that I made. I don't want you to make the mistakes, I think sometimes, and that goes back to, we were talking about ego. Sometimes people want to walk around that they're perfect and they do this and they do that. And that's not always the case, right? And so, and I think you can mask it for only so long. So you have to be, live your life with transparency. And I think, especially with children, they know, and so it's good to have the conversation. And I talk to all of my children about, life, finances, struggles. Here's an example. Dad went through this. This is what I don't want you to do. This is why I'm saying don't go left, go right. And we have these conversations, very transparent.
Yeah. It's so cool. My children are grown, so I have 8 of them, and my youngest is 29 now. I just turned 60 like 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
And so it's fun because now I'm talking to my kids and they're telling me, Dad, I remember you doing this, and I'm like, oh no, I don't remember that. Don't tell don't tell my grandkids that. Don't tell me that this is what happened. One of the things that I love to kind of ask you, because I think that a lot of us feel like sometimes we're stuck, like we don't know how to move forward. We don't know how to move. And you're, as you're getting ready to become the president of a predominantly Black organization, what are some of the things that you might give as advice to folks that are thinking, I want to do something, I want to move forward. I feel like I haven't had the opportunities that other people have had. I don't really know how to get going or started. What were some of the things that maybe either you did or some of the things you do in your classes now that help folks that are they get up every morning and they're not excited about it? I love my life. I can't wait to get up every day. But I know there's so many people that are not there.
Yeah, and I think for me it's a little different. I'm 5'5", so I played basketball, and I love the terminology pound for pound, right? Because pound for pound, I want to say that I was probably one of the great ones, but I was 5'5", so you had to get up and you had to show up every day. So I think when we talk about being stuck, it's really about committing to what it is that you say you're going to do and doing it. I always take the example of if you're at home and you're like, hey, I'm going to do this today. I have all these chores I'm going to do. And then you overwhelm yourself. So you end up not doing any of them, or you do them halfway. So I think it's like, take one thing at a time, focus on the next step, understanding the long goal. The sacrifices today will pay off for tomorrow. And I think that that would help a lot of us to really move forward. When I learned how to put one foot in front of the other and really just say, okay, yes, I want to scale my company to a certain, level. But then I had to say, well, okay, well, what level am I at now? And what's the next level? As opposed to thinking 10 levels down the way. I think sometimes we overthink ourselves, and then, we feel stuck in a situation. So, if you did, I tell my loan officers, if you did one loan last month, this month you're trying to do 2, right? But if you just sit up here and say, I'm going to do 10, right? You're always going to feel like you haven't reached that goal. So baby steps are very important into the long journey, and I think sometimes that's misunderstood.
Yeah, that it is a journey, right? That you don't just wake up. And I think, like, especially in our fast-paced society, maybe you can kind of talk about, you brought up technology a little bit.
Yeah.
But these are these devices and these, now we have AI and we have all these things. And I think the expectation is, well, I can do everything instantly and it's not going to take me. But maybe you can talk a little bit about becoming the person that can do the thing instead of just trying to do everything and have everything, and not that personal development piece that we all have to go through in order to be that person who can do it.
Yeah, I mean, well, with technology, I'll just tell you that I thought I was a technology person, but it's moving so fast that you look up and you're feeling like you're left behind. And I think, that kind of really drives us in terms of not being able to fully understand or fully commit to getting up and working. I saw an interview with Michael Jordan, and he was talking about contracts. He was talking about endorsements. And I thought it was a great interview because he was saying that today there's players that are getting paid before they even played their first game. back in the day, you had to prove yourself
Mm-hmm.
before you got paid.
Yeah.
And it's just a different time in which we live in. And I see that a lot of times in various industries, not just athletics, but in business as well. People are coming in and saying that, hey, I'm qualified because I'm self-qualified, and so I should get compensated this amount, or I should get treated a certain way, and they haven't put in the work. And I still think that old school, putting in the work, elbow grease, learning, getting down, getting your hands a little dirty is the way to go, and it's gonna teach you a lot in the long run to actually apply yourself. People out in sales aren't doing any business, but they got 5 assistants. Like,
Yeah.
I can't understand it, right? I still don't understand it, and I'm sitting over here and I'm getting up early in the morning. I'm staying late in the evening. I'm doing the sacrifices that are needed. And so I think that we have to get back into the work ethics that many of our parents, grandparents, and so on had years ago.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh my gosh. When you think about relationships, because you are in a relationship oriented business,
Mm-hmm.
you can't do without relationships. And some people want to forgo that for whether it's the technology or I'll just email you and you expect a response or not picking up the phone. What would you say about the importance of relationship for long-term success?
No, so for me, relationships are everything. I think making that connection with somebody personally will take things a long way. We could look at things differently. We could have did this interview over the phone, but the connection with the video connects us a little closer. Right now, I see your face, you see my face, and I think that that's what most humans want, not just in business, just in personal things, right? In family, your sibling or whatnot lives less than an hour away, but you haven't seen him in 8 months. Like those connections, you can talk to them all you want, but I think it really means so much more for you to pull up on them and spend a couple hours with them or whatnot, and then go back home. I think that we look at things as sacrifice, and I think time is so important, which technology saves us a lot of time. But what are we doing with the time that we're saving, right? Are we investing that back into our families, or are we still chasing a moving target? And so it's very important to me. I love to entertain, have my friends over, my family over and whatnot. And that's because I enjoy the interaction of humans. So, hopefully that doesn't go away with all of this new technology, but no matter what, I'm gonna always be that person. And I think it's helped me so far in business as well as personally, so much.
I agree so much. I mean, relationships are everything. And then, when we look at our phones and we have, 3,000 folks that are on our phone and our acquaintance, it's the relationships of the people that are closest to us that seem to make all the difference in the world. I want to pivot a little bit to just business.
Yes.
You've talked about words like scaling, and you've said things like, to move up in my company, or I have employees or 5 assistants, and there's folks that are saying, okay, I want to do this and I want to do it right. Where do you go to learn about business? And like I said, like I had a guest on a couple last week that was, hey, I learned how to be a businessman because I was a drug dealer. I'm not suggesting that to anybody who's watching or listening, and that's why we're talking to Ashley this week. But what is it that you think is the best way to learn? And then what are some of the pitfalls that people are definitely going to encounter that they shouldn't stop? Because it's the guy who perseveres and does it 25 years that gets to see all the fruits of it, not the guy who does it for 3 months and quits because he didn't think it was going to be this hard.
Yeah, I mean, for business, I would say in terms of where I went to get my business, I think in a lot of businesses, especially in the Black community, we're good at what we do. We're great at what we do, right? And so if we cook pies, we're the best pie maker, but that doesn't translate to actually understanding how to run a pie business, right? And so for me, I was great at sales, making connection with people, understanding what their needs were and having that conversation. But then to actually say, now I'm running a business where I have employees and have all of that. So my first mentor, who has been my tax accountant for many years, is probably the greatest mentor I've had in business, because he sees everyone's business. So he told me, Ashley, this is how you set it up. This is what you need to do. This, so I was able to stay away from some pitfalls, not all of them, but some of them, and then really go that direction. Now, on the other side, the scaling, I looked at people that were doing business to where I wanted to go, and I went and asked them. I had questions. Not everyone, some people looked at me as a competitor. I'm not going to show you what I do. But others were like, hey, I'll show you everything, because there's enough pie for all of us to go around. And so finding those individuals are very important. Then becoming that individual. So I feel the same way. I have people that have worked in my company, have gone on to open up other companies, and I love it. And I congratulate them, and I'm there on opening night, and I'm supporting them and everything like that. And I think we need to do a better job of that piece in terms of supporting one another, as opposed to looking at each other as competition, right? I do, let's just say there's 500,000 transactions in the state of California. I can handle all of those. Why wouldn't I want to see my friend or my family member doing that as well with me? So, I think that that's very important.
Oh my gosh, I love it, because when you think about lack and abundance, and there's so much of it's like in this day and age with our country and where it's at, where there's just this lack of mentality that says, if you have, it must take from me. And if I have and I give it to you, I can't have it. Right. How have you been able to live your life with that abundance mindset that says there's enough for everybody? Because there truly is. I mean, God is a God of abundance and resources. And, why would you think that just because I'm in the same, in the same areas, that there's not enough for both of us to be able to thrive?
Yeah, I think, and probably when we're done, I'm going to pick up the phone and call my mother, because she's coming up so much in this conversation that I didn't even think about. But, my mom, single mother, worked very hard, those types of things. We had family members that maybe didn't have certain things. And my mom I'd come downstairs and she was giving away the TV, because we didn't need multiple TVs. We're fine. They don't have one. So here we go, and I'm thinking like, but what are we doing? Like, that's my TV, And so learning that has really been a blessing for me. I don't even think about giving somebody any type of assistance. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I had turned it off. So I don't even question helping anybody or anything like that. And I think that that's really helped me in the long run, because there's always going to be a day where you're going to be the one who's needing help, And so don't get too full of yourself in business, because, and which we learned in 2009, 2010, in the housing market specifically, it didn't matter how great and how many connections you had. If you weren't, when the foreclosure started happening, a lot of people weren't doing business anymore. People were moving. They were on a different side of this, And so I think that was something that really was a humbling experience for the industry. But then let's fast forward. We go 10 years later, many people forgot about that. They forgot what that felt like. And so I would just, encourage people, don't forget about the struggles and the trials that you went through. No matter where you're at today, you can be back there tomorrow. And so it's always about constantly working, focusing on what it is that you want to do, and being humble to the fact that you can be up today and down tomorrow. And we've seen that story play over millions of times. So don't think that you're exempt from that happening to you. And so I live my life that way, right? I live my life understanding, I'm a business owner today, but next week I can say, I used to be a business owner, right? But for the grace of God, understanding and remaining humble, those are very important to do. And so, and you also want to make those connections that we talked about before, because if people don't want to be around you, they don't want to do business with you, right? And so from a business perspective, that has helped me tremendously. It's something that I've sacrificed hours in the office to get out there and reinforce those connections and interactions with people.
thinking through 2007 and 8 and all the relationships that I can still call on those folks, even though that, everything happened. I had a mortgage business in Rancho Cucamonga, and it was gone. Like you said, business owner today, not business owner, next week.
Yeah, and you know how that goes. You said you counting on some of those deals to close. You had already spent those checks, right? And it was like this deal is canceled, and so that's something that really hit a lot of families.
Ooh, oh, it did in a big way. Which brings me, you can't outgive God, and He's a God of abundance. And maybe you can talk a little bit about your faith and how your faith has played a part in your success and the failures that you have, and how you've depended on Him to through all this process.
Well, I think this is my favorite question so far, and I love this question just because I am a man of faith. In terms of God, in my relationship and the things but not just because of the things He's brought me through, right? Just I believe that it's a blessing to wake up every morning. And one of the things that I've been saying lately, in 2025, I said in 2025, I'm going to live my life to the fullest every single day. And one of the reasons why is because I don't want God to look at the list and say, well, who's not enjoying their time? I want to be so far down that list where He's like, you know what, Ashley's enjoying his time. We're going to continue to protect him with grace and everything like that, And so I feel like not living your life in unhappiness and anger and all of the negative attributes. I feel like it's almost offensive to God's blessing to wake you up in the morning. And so that's how I live my life. That's how I encourage those around me to live their life. If people come in and they're not feeling well and they come to the office and they have a downtime or an attitude, I feel like it's my job to bring them out of that, and so, and I have people around me that do the same for me as well. So.
Oh my God, yes. And yeah, as I was doing my walk this morning, I was just so thankful for what I haven't had to endure and all the things that I've been blessed with. And the fact that I could get up and walk this morning and talk this morning and, be able to have this conversation that we get to have today is such a blessing. And
absolutely,
where would I be without that? When I think about a lot of, especially men of color that have not been as blessed or have had to go through some things. And, I listened to a guy named Myron Golden who talks about that's not the reason for, I guess, determining factor and the factors that the reasons why we don't succeed. But there has been trauma and there has been some things. And I know, people and some trauma that we've all had ourselves. What would be your advice of dealing with trauma and how to move forward and not go backwards as a result of it?
Yeah, and I say, being a Black man in America, there's systemic barriers. There's past trauma that has come through generationally. And so I understand first, because what I don't want to ever do is answer the question from a perspective of superiority or that I've learned or I mastered the questions, because we all go through it. We all are going to feel stuck or in a rut at some point in our lives, and some point in our year, some point in our month, right? And so for me, I think you have to develop a system to how you get out of that rut. And it works different for all of us because we're all unique. We're all different. For me, laying in the bed does not help me get out of my rut, right? Mm-hmm. And so I have to get up, I have to get moving, I got to get around, and so that's how I pretty much do things. But I do want to acknowledge the fact that, it's a challenge. It's hard out here. There's opportunities, that are presented to people that you feel that don't deserve it as much as you, and you've put in all this time and you didn't get that promotion or you didn't get that opportunity or you didn't win over that client, and it hurts. And I think that that's the thing that I would encourage people to, especially Black men, is to acknowledge what it is. And sometimes we don't want to use words like that hurt, and I think some things hurt, and it's okay to say, that really hurt me because I thought I was prepared. But you know what? If it comes up, the opportunity presents itself again, I'm gonna be prepared. So I'm gonna study why I didn't get it, and I'm gonna work towards that. And I think that that's the thing. I think we get stuck a lot of times because we're hurt. And then our hurt is manifested through anger. Our hurt is manifested in many other ways, or throwing in the towel, or pivoting before we see it. One of my famous quotes that I love hearing is people say, it's coldest at night right before the sun rises. So that's the coldest point at night, is right before the sun is going to break through. And so understanding that this is a long journey, don't give up, accept the fact of where we are. As you stated, which I love, be blessed for the problems you don't have, right?
Mm-hmm.
It can be worse. Okay. As long as you're speaking and thinking, it definitely can be worse. So, I think that, being stuck, and I see it all the time. I see it all the time, and I'm familiar with it because I lived it too. So I think it's just important where I'm at this stage in my life is you got to keep moving. You got to keep moving.
Oh, thank you. We are who the words that we speak, and the words that we say to ourselves, and the words that we say to others, and words matter. And I want to move this conversation, when we're talking about words, into money, because money is one of those things that we speak sometimes so poorly about our beliefs and our values and our relationship with money, that I think sometimes it doesn't manifest itself in our lives. Whether it's home ownership, or whether it's investing, or whether it's just not understanding how money works.
Right.
What are some of the things, as a businessman, as somebody who's been successful, who's climbed the ladder, what are some of the things that you do around money, that you say around money, that is part of your money relationship belief system?
So for me, I'm very conservative with money.
Okay.
Many people around you will tell you that that's not true. Um, but I believe that I'm very conservative with money. I'm not a flashy big spender or whatnot, but I think it's really, with finances, is really a matter of, I worked at a retail store late in high school. I was trying to juggle a couple of jobs, actually. And I met a janitor at the retail store, and he told me, he says, listen, I own multiple homes. I just do this because this is what I enjoy seeing people. He's like, I don't have to do this, right? But everybody that walked by this individual probably said, oh, he's just a janitor. And so he taught me a very principle about money at that point. It's, we can complain about income inequality. We can complain about all those things, which they exist. They exist, and they should exist. But we also have a responsibility when we do receive our money, what we choose to do with it. And I think that that's very important to really understand. And so for me, I was blessed to have met that individual. I was blessed to have been in the banking world. So I learned about money at a very early age. And then growing up, I learned lack of money and what that looked like. And so my work commitment was, I don't want to be at the lack anymore. So if I got to work 12 hours, that's what I had to do. So, I think if you don't understand money, go ask. Go ask a tax person, what should I be doing? Is this a good investment? And I think we don't ask enough questions because, especially as men, we're expected to know. We're expected, and only God is omniscient, right? I don't know it all, but he did give me the foresight to be able to go ask a question and say, hey, how do you do this? I want to learn. And I think with money, we need to do a better job as a community with that as well.
Yeah, when you think about the people that you ask, I mean, that's important too. And some of us want to go ask the person that is the most flashy and has, what we think, the one that's driving that Benz and driving the Land Rover and living in the house and stuff. Is how do we find that right person, not only for us, but sometimes those folks that are doing good with, I mean, they look like they're doing good with money.
I was gonna say, they look like they're doing good. They got that car locked up in that garage because that Porsche is about to get repoed. So it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what they're doing, And I think us getting out of the materialistic of society and really looking at what are we investing in? What am I doing with my money that's going to give me a return, and having those conversations. And I think mentorship to young men is so vitally important. I did it going in church. We had the rites of passage at my church for young men. We had to take these classes. You open the door for the young lady, and this is how you speak, and this is what you do. And we had all of that, and that was a blessing, because even to this day, I learned how to tie a tie in that class. So I would say, to the single mothers that are out there, or to the young men that are out there, seek those types of. They're in every city across America. Somebody that wants to give back, and I say take that extra time to do that, because even to this day, I wake up in the morning, I'm tying my tie. Go to a meeting, I still tie my tie as Elder Banks taught me how to tie my tie, right? And so that was 35 years ago. But I think about Elder Banks every time I tie my tie, so that was important for me.
Talk to me a little bit about, I love that, because there are places that we can go, and there are really good mentors that are out there that can help you understand. But don't try to do it on your own. Folks, don't try to do it on your own, because you don't know what you don't know, and you can't just pull that out of the air. So when I think of home ownership, and right now there's this trend that seems to be going out there that says you don't need a home, you're better off renting, you're better off being able to so that gives you mobility to be able to move around. It gives you density where you can get to work really quick, and all these things. Maybe as part of a more money formula, maybe you can kind of speak to, as being a banker and a real estate person and a mortgage person, the power of home ownership.
Yeah, so I've had to also evolve my thinking about home ownership too, because we are in a different world and society today than maybe we were 20 years ago. And so when I first got into the business 25 years ago, I would always say, you got to own a home to live in. You got to own. And I still believe home ownership is paramount to generational wealth and what you're going to pass down to your children. But I would say that even if you want to have the mobility and you want to move around and you want to not plant your feet into home ownership, then you should plant your feet into owning property that you can lease and rent out, and let that pay for your luxury apartment if that's what you want to do. But you should have some type of income flow. So when you're at sleep at night and that house down the street sold, and now you got some more equity because it gave you some equity because it was valued so high, that's like a second job. And the way society has been moving lately in terms of the cost of milk, the cost of eggs, right? The cost of gas is always a situation. Electricity and utility bills are always moving and ever changing. So I think ownership allows you to build wealth while not having to do anything about it. And I'll go back to one particular property that I had in Los Angeles that I was selling for a client. And so they had the property. It was probably worth, let's just say $300,000. They sat on the property, left it vacant for 4 years, and then sold the property. And it was probably worth over $500,000 at that time. So they gained almost $200,000. And this was probably 2012 to 16, that range of time frame. But they gained $200,000 doing nothing, right? And so they didn't rent it. They didn't do anything. And so obviously we have a housing problem. We don't need vacant properties. We need people to rent these homes. But at the same time, you see where I'm going in terms of ownership. They couldn't have got that from any other part of the business or any other job that just allows you to make money while you sleep and don't do anything, right? And so I think it's very important for that.
Yeah. Oh, and thank you for sharing that, because that does give a perspective of, because I've seen folks where they get together, like maybe they were college roommates or something, and they pull money together and they go buy an investment property, even though they might be living in an apartment, but they're investing instead of, some people, I just want to save. Well, savings is a depreciating asset, right? Because your money's going to be worth less next year than it is this year if it's not being invested somehow. So I love that perspective where you're just saying, hey, no, it's not, you don't have to go live in the white picket fence house that you own, that you live in and grow, but but you need to own something or invest in something as a result of making sure that you start creating a portfolio that's different than just existing. Because I think sometimes we're just such consumers that we want to go buy everything and have everything, but not that piece where there's tithing and the piece where there's savings and investing. Do you have a formula for how much money you should actually live on compared to how much money? And I know it's different phases at different times in life and stuff, but if that's something a mentor told you or helped you out with that you would love to share with us.
So I struggle on saying how much somebody should live on, right? But what I will say there are a couple of key things that I live by, right? And so if I can't, I apologize, I can't turn this computer off. If one, having, my mother, my grandma, my aunt, my aunt would always tell me, like, you need to have at least 6 months of whatever your bills are to the side, right? That's just the way it was. You put 6 months to the side. One of the things that I heard recently from a financial planner, he said, if you can't buy it 10 times, don't buy it, right? With the exception of maybe the car or the house, right? But other than that, like, if you want to go on to your Amazon account or whatnot and purchase, whatever you're buying, can you buy it 10 times? And if you can't buy it 10 times, maybe you don't need to buy it. And I said, well, 10 seems a little high, but maybe I need to apply that. But I think it's a great rule,
It's a great rule, yeah.
I can't say that I'm living by 10 times on every purchase, but sometimes I think it makes sense to like start to apply those things, because obviously everyone deals with different income levels and whatnot, and so maybe it's your objective is more of a business plan to say, I want to increase my income. So I'm at this job and I'm going to be looking and growing my skill set so I can be more marketable and earn some more money in my next opportunity. I think that those are equally important as well. So.
Ashley, thank you. I've been really selfish in asking you the questions that I want to know so my life can improve from somebody such as yourself. But what did we not talk about in our last few minutes that we have together that you would love to make sure that our audience hears, that our audience knows about today?
So a couple of things I saw on one of the things that you have spoken on many times was, past trauma. And I think that that's very important because I'll be honest with you, I went through certain times in my life where people talk about trauma and I'm like, that's just an excuse, just get up and do it. And as I've gotten older and I've witnessed people go through trauma and how it's impacted certain things, then you start to look at yourself a little bit more. And I think I would encourage all listeners, men, women, Black, white, anyone. I think it's very important for us to really identify what is impacting us. That's behavior wise. That's any of those things. I think if you grew up in a home where everybody was short tempered and everybody's yelling all the time, that might not translate very well to business. Right. And so I think really understanding those concepts are very important. And I would just challenge you to really do a deep dive in yourself. A second thing I would say is, like, in our community, I don't think we utilize therapy enough. I think it's almost a taboo. It's almost like buying life insurance. If I buy life insurance, I'm going to die, right? And so that's the way people kind of have a subconscious thought about. But I think therapy is like, if I go to a therapist and I'm acknowledging I have a problem, no, you might just need to vent. And you might need to vent to somebody who's not going to lead you down a wrong path. Like, yes, leave, quit your job, right? You might go vent to somebody who's going to be a little more logical and is disconnected from your situation. And so that's very important as well. So, I think that those, two things will help us be better fathers, also help us be better children as our parents are aging, better business people, as well as better friends. And I think that, we can work on ourselves. I think, social media is very funny because social media, when you go on there, everybody's telling everybody else about them, but you don't really find too much where people are saying, I've had to overcome this, right? I remember growing up in the church, I loved testimony because testimony always taught me like it was real. Like, wow, they went through that, or their lights were cut off. Oh my God, like I didn't know that, and it was really like it was educational for me. I enjoyed the testimony more so than somebody coming pointing a finger and saying, this is what you better do, and I think that that's very important. So those things, if we kind of conclude on that note, I definitely think those are very important. I would encourage anybody to really take a deep dive in internally.
Yeah. Well, thank you, because that is so important. And sometimes we tend to, like I said before, try to figure this all out by ourselves. And there are people out there that are willing not only to help, but can guide you through whatever it is you're going through. And if we lean on each other, the chances of us doing better as a community is that much greater. Yeah. And so, like I said, I thank you for being part of the show today. I thank you for your wisdom. I'm hoping that maybe we can, since you're president-elect now, after you become president, maybe we can just come back and do a show that's just on NAREB and what NAREB's doing and how it's impacting the community and all the wonderful things that you guys do. I guess I'm part of NAREB too, but as the organization does, to just make lives better for those out there. And if you are a person that enjoyed this show and you enjoyed listening to Ashley and I go back and forth, there's so many like this that are there, people who are doing it. And I wish you hope that you would take advantage of it. And so hit notifications so you know when new ones are coming out. Go through the library of over now 170 some episodes of Black men who are doing something special in their communities and making it happen. And Ashley, like I said, again, for you to take your time and, out of your day to be able to talk with us, it's just been a pleasure and it's been wonderful. And I can't wait to talk to you on the next one. So for those of you out there, don't forget you are God's greatest gift. He loves you if you allow him to. And we'll look forward to talking to you on the next one. Have a good one.